Hi everyone, welcome to Byte and Beyond with Uday. This is our final part for Global Exception Handling series. And in this video, we are going to test the APIs after implementing this Global Exception Handler. And I will also explain how the request flow travels when there is an exception occurrence in the Spring Boot application. And in the end, I'm going to make a small tweak inside our risk controller advice for validation exception handler. So this is the agenda for this video. So let's begin. So before we start testing our APIs, you need to make sure that your MySQL server is up and running. In my case, it is. I can execute queries over here. So please check that and then start your Spring Boot application. And we are good to test our APIs. So let me go to the Postman. And if you see our service, so in last video, we have added few validation over here. Okay, that's what we are going to test in this video. So let's first try the happy scenario for the post API, which is going to save the user Uday. So let me first try the happy scenario. Happy scenario meaning the yeah, happy scenario meaning that it should work. It should work. I mean, it worked absolutely fine. Okay. So let me try that. So you can see the we are able to create the user. So that's perfect. That is expected. But now let me add the ID which we did earlier accidentally. But let me add ID this time intentionally, and let me change the what I can say the username. Okay, Harry. Let me keep this Uday for now. Okay. So as you have seen earlier, without employee ID, we were successfully able to save user Uday, and you can verify that with the get API. Let me get all the employees. You can see user Uday is uh, persisted successfully fine. So now if you add the employee ID for the post, so this is not expected. The employee ID should not be present in the post API request body, but we are sending it intentionally just to verify how our Spring Boot application reacts. So you can see it is throwing an exception with three fields. The first one is status, which is 400 bad request. You can see, and here is the message error message which says do not include employee ID on create. So it is giving us an indication that you should not add the employee ID in this request body, and this is a timestamp. Okay, so yeah, I can understood that I need to remove this employee ID. Now let me try to save this once again. Now I am getting another error, which is the status is same for 400 bad requests, which is correct. Our request body is not good, so it is bad. So that is why it is 400 bad request. And the message is employee with email uday@gmail.com already exists, which is right. Because if we see the user Uday, let me go to the get API. If we see the user Uday, you can see over here the user Uday, the employee Uday already have this email address. So I cannot use the duplicate email address, right? So instead of that, let me use the correct email address. For Harry, it is harry@gmail.com. Now let me try to save this. See, it is saved successfully. Let me try to fetch all the employees from our system. You can see Harry is saved successfully. Now, let me explain how this request flow travels. Okay. So let me go to the IDE. So we have demonstrated the post API. Okay. The happy flow. Okay. When our user or when the employee gets saved successfully, and the not happy flow, unhappy flow basically when user do not get persisted successfully and we are getting an exception. Okay, so we have seen both the ways. So let me explain how the request flow travels. Okay, when there is an exception occurrence. So first of all, let me open the controller. Okay, so this is our controller, and if you can see, this is our post API. So when you hit the page post API from the Postman, the request comes over here, and then you can see we are sending this employee DTO, the request body, to our service layer. So I will go inside my service layer, and you can see over here we have written a validation method. So if I go inside this method will basically validates our employee DTO. Employee DTO is what is employee DTO? Employee DTO is our request body. So whatever data we are sending inside our request body, it will be get serialized inside this OJO or employee DTO class. Serialized meaning all the fields which we are sending from our postman, all this field, first name, last name, email, salary, will be get mapped with these fields. So it calls serialized. Okay. There are two concepts, serialization and deserialization. So the thing which we are trying right now, we are sending our request body from the postman, and it will be get mapped with these properties. It called serialized. Okay. So once all the data get mapped inside this employee DTO, okay, and our request comes to our save method of our service layer, and then it goes to the this method which we have written earlier. And over here you can see I have written two more methods. First method, which is this one, validate ID, ID, employee ID for create. Okay, basically valid employee ID for create. So this will basically validate our employee ID. If employee ID is not null, then it will throw an exception. So if you see this message, you can see the message is similar, which we are getting in our postman. So the message is do not include employee ID on create. Okay. So we are getting the same message over here. Let me you know let me let me try to simulate once again for you. Just a moment. Let me undo all this. You can see we are getting the same message over here. Same goes for the email address. Okay. We have seen this email address employee with email, and then actual email address already exists. So when this condition does not match, okay, then this either of this exception will get thrown from our service layer. Let's say in our case, the let's say employee sending this is the case. Let's say employee sending ID over here. Okay, then we will throw an exception from here. This is bad request exception. If I click on it, I'm passing the message. Okay, I'm taking a message inside the constructor, and I'm passing it to the superclass. Superclass will be the runtime exception. Okay, and when I throw this exception, it ultimately it will be ultimately catched by our global exception handler, which is here, which is here. Okay, so if you see, this is our, so yeah, after the service layer, here from here we are throwing an exception. It comes to the global exception handler, okay, and global exception handler check checks each and every method, okay, that who which method is handling bad request exception. So this is not handling, this one is also not handling, this one is also not handling. Yeah, now global exception handler has find, yes, this method is basically handling the bad request exception. So it will come over here. Over here we are basically, preparing the error response. The error, if you see the API error class, this is status, message, and timestamp. So that's what we are looking at over here inside the error response. This is status, message, and timestamp. So it is this API error which we are preparing inside this method or inside this handler. This handler is specific to bad request exception. Okay, so you can see over here I'm passing the HTTP status bad request value, which is 400, and I am passing the message which I am sending it from here. Okay, this message. Do not include employee ID on create this message. Okay, so that message I am passing inside the API error constructor. You can see my this constructor is expecting two parameters, status and message, and timestamp I am generating inside the constructor itself. So I don't need to pass the timestamp over here. Okay, and once my API error response or object is ready, I am sending this uh, API response inside this response entity. So if you need to send the JSON response, this response entity which we use, okay, in order to send the response in Spring Boot, you need to wrap your Ojo class or your object inside this response entity. So that's what I'm doing over here. I'm using the response entity, and as a status I'm passing bad request, which you are seeing over here. So if you this status is this comes from the this status which we are sending inside the response entity, and the postman is reading this status and it is showing over here. Okay, and then in the body I am sending the API error which we have prepared i- over here. So this is our API error response. So if I summarize this flow, then let me once again explain. So you can remember this flow. You are sending this send request from here. Okay. When you hit the send button, first it comes to your controller. It goes to here because this is the post mapping. Then it comes to the service layer. Okay. Here is the service layer. Over here we have written our validation method. Okay, which will validate our ID, employee ID, and the email address. In our case, the first it will check the employee ID, and in our case, employee ID is present in our request body, so it will throw an exception. Okay, with this particular message. Once it's throw an exception, the flow will go to the global exception handler, and this global exception handler will check which method is responsible to handle bad request exception, because from here we are proving the bad request exception. So the global exception handler will check each and every method one by one, which method is handling this bad request exception. So it finds this method, the last one. Hey, this method is handling bad request exception. So the call will comes here. Over here we are preparing our error response. Okay, and in the end we are wrapping our error response inside the response entity, and we are returning the response entity, and then user will show this response over here. So this is the flow whenever whenever the exception occurs in the Spring Boot application. So this is very helpful in if you are preparing for an interview, or if you are going to work in a real world project in your organization, this flow will help you a lot to troubleshoot the issue. If you are facing any kind of issue related to this area, this flow will help you a lot. Okay, so this is for the post API. Now let's move to the put. Let's try taste the put API. Okay, so for the put, let me use the Harry over here. Okay, this is our put API. Okay, let me use the Harry, and okay, let me remove the employee ID, because for the put we need the employee ID field. So now let me send the request. So you can see I'm getting 400 bad requests, and the message is employee ID must be provided for update, meaning I need the employee ID over here. Okay, so if I provide the employee ID, I will be able to I will be able to update the Harry employee. So you can see we have successfully updated the Harry employee. I can change the salary over here. Okay, see, and let's say Harry is trying to trying to use Uday's email address. So let's do that. Let's see what happens now. See, we are getting 400 bad request. Employee with email uday@gmail.com already exists. So mm, so yeah, we are getting the exception if the request body is not correct. Okay, and and whether you are using post, put, get, delete, okay, the request flow is same for each and every exception. Okay, so over here as well we are getting 400 bad requests, so the flow is same. Okay, which I have just explained for the post. So let's move to the get. So as we know, we have two user with ID 1 and 2. 2 is for Harry, and 1 is for the, this is not correct, this one is correct. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is not get. Actually, I accidentally changed it to delete. So I think I have deleted the one of the user from our database, but it's okay. We can create new one if we need. Okay, so let me, instead of Harry, let me create Emma. Okay, let me create Emma. Emma, pardon me for any spelling mistake I'm making over here. Okay, let me just remove the extra A, Emma. Okay, let me remove this ID as well, because in post we don't need employee ID. Okay, great. Now we have two user again. One is Harry and another one is Emma. Okay, now let's try the get API. I was demonstrating you the get API. I can, okay, let me use the two. Okay, I'm getting the user 2, okay, because it is present in our system. I am getting the user 3, Emma, because it is also present in our system. But let's say I'm trying the user ID 30. In that case, I'm getting 404. So whenever the resource is not available in your system, you should throw the 404 not found exception, because this employee is not available in our system. So I'm throwing the 404 employee not found with the ID 30. You can see this 30. So the request flow is same, but let me explain how this ID get changed. Okay, 404. Earlier we used to get 400. Now we are getting 404. So how this ID get changed? Let me explain this pretty quick. So this is put API, right? No, pardon me. This is get API, and we are sending the ID 30. You can see this ID 30, and then it goes to our service layer. And in service layer, we have validation method. Okay, this validation method checks inside our database. You can see it is calling our repository. Repository talks with the database. It asks database, hey database, do we have any employee with ID 30? Database says no. Whenever database says no, it throws, our Spring Boot application throws resource not found exception. Okay. So if you see, this is the different exception than the bad request one. Okay. I mean the name is different, you can see, but the signature is same. Okay. So this is resource not found exception. Okay. So whenever you throw the our service layer will throw the resource not found exception from here. It will similar with the bad request exception. It will go to the global exception handler, and global exception handler will check over here which method is handling resource not found exception. So it will see this one, resource not found exception. Okay, resource not found exception. And you can see over here we are similarly preparing the response, error response. And instead of, you can see earlier in bad request, we were sending the HTTP status bad request. Over here we are sending the not found. For the not found, okay, let me show you, this is not found, and you can see the value is 404. Okay. And similar to bad request, we are wrapping this error response inside this response entity, and we are returning it. So that's how the request travels. Okay. For the get all, we don't need any, response. I mean, not response. For get API, we don't need any validation, because even if there is no user, we will get the empty response. So there is no validation required for the get all. Now let's move to the delete. Okay. Let me, okay. Let me delete the user one. Let me check how many user do we have over here. We have two users with ID 2 and 3. But let me try to delete the user with ID 1. Let's see what happens. See, I'm getting again 404 because resource is not found. Okay. And you can see employee not found with ID 1. Now try the let me try to delete the user with the correct ID, which is 2. You can see I'm getting 204 no content, meaning our server or our Spring Boot application has deleted the employee with ID 2 successfully. And if we see this get API, we will get only one user. See, now it is Emma only. Now let me delete the Emma as well. Okay, let me send. See, again I'm getting 204, which is success. And if I try to get all the employees, now I am getting empty response. One more thing I would like to highlight with you, that I have mistakenly used for the email duplication. I have mistakenly used the bad request exception. Okay. So if I go to my service layer, so if we see our service layer, then for the email address for both the update and for create, mistakenly we have used bad request exception. Instead of that, we should use resource conflict. Okay. I will explain you why we should use the resource conflict. Okay. But yeah, before I do that, let me show you the difference. Okay. Uh, uh, um, let me let me fetch the all the employees, and let me see how many employees do we have. Zero. First of all, let me create new user. Okay, created. Let me try to save same user once again. It is showing me employee with email am@gmail.com already exists, but the status is bit wrong. Okay, it should not be 400. There is a specific status for the resource conflict, and let me update this for the update as well, update method as well. So this one is for the create. Okay, This is get meaning post API, and same goes for the put as well. Okay, so okay, let me do one thing. Let me try to get. Okay, what was the okay? Let me fetch all the user from our system, and if I see the ID is Emma, okay, let me do one more thing. Let me copy this. Okay, let me go to the get API. Let me copy this. Let me come to the put API, and okay, and if I do one thing, let me create one more user, okay, which is Uday. Let me create Uday Patel, and the email address is Uday. This should be saved successfully. Okay, it is saved. If I get, okay, right. Okay, now Emma is trying to use Uday's email address, which is wrong. Okay, and over here as well, we are getting the bad request. Bad request. Okay, the status is wrong. We should get appropriate status for the resource conflict. Okay, so over here as well, I'm getting 400, and for the put as well, I'm getting 400. So let me update. So accidentally, instead of resource conflict exception for the email, I have used that bad request exception. But let me correct my mistake. Okay, resource conflict exception, and let me restart my application, and then let's see the magic. Okay, it's up and running. So let's try the post API first. Now let's see if our see the response status get changed, and over here as well, instead of 400 we are getting 409. This is the status code for the resource conflict. This is 409 resource conflict. Okay, so what is resource conflict? Resource conflict meaning we already have one resource, okay, with this email address, okay, uday at the gmail.com. Now I'm trying to, I'm trying to save one more user with the same name. Okay, that is okay. Name can be the same. That is fine. First name, last name can be the same. But we know that email must be unique. But now, as we know, in our system, we already have one user with Uday till, okay, and his email address is uday@gmail.com. Now we are trying to add one more user with the same email address, which is wrong. Okay, so that is why we are getting 409. Now let me do one more thing to make this email address unique. Let me add p udayp@gmail.com. It should be saved. You can see this user saved successfully. And if I fetch, now I have two Uday, but with the different ID and with the different email address. Okay, same goes for the put as well. If you try to save two employees with the same email address, it will throw an exception. So if I same Emma is trying to use Uday's email address, uday@gmail.com, Emma should get 409 resource conflict exception. In this case, we are not getting um, that 409. Let me check why. Okay, let me check why. Ah, okay. By mistake, instead of in email, I have updated that resource conflict inside the this ID validation method. So let me undo that. Okay, and for the email validation method, let me update this resource conflict. Let me restart my application once again. It is restarting. It is up and running now. Now let me try the put. See 409. Perfect. Perfect. And one more thing. Um, if you remember, we have added validation exception as well. Okay. So now let me do one thing. Let me close all the tabs except this global exception handler. And you can see we have added our validation exception handler as well, specifically in our validation videos. So let me open the employee detail first to demonstrate you. You can see we have added a few validation annotation on the email, on the first name, and on the minimum salary. So let me demonstrate uh, this validation exception handler error response. So let me do one thing. Let me send the name as empty. Okay, let's see what kind of message we are receiving from the server. Uh, okay, now we are for all the exception we are getting status message and timestamp. Now let's check the validation. You can see this is bit different. Okay, we don't see the message, the status and timestamp field over here. Okay, only this field, first name must not be blank. Okay, this is good, but the what but this is not recommended. Okay, in real world application you should have same error response across your application. Why? Because if you keep the same error response, then your consumer can be another service or maybe a front end who can understand that yes, from this application, from Spring Boot application, XYZ Spring Boot application, I will get only three fields when there is an exception: the status, the message, and the timestamp. So it should be same for across your application. It should not be like this. For few validation you are getting, this structured error response. Let me show you the structured error response, and few errors you are getting this kind of random error message. So this is not recommended, or this is not a good design. So good design is you should have same error response structure across your application. Okay. So in our case, it is status, message, and timestamp. So that's what I'm going to do for the validation as well. Okay. So it goes for the email address as well. If the email is not valid, okay, it will show you the same kind of error response. Okay, and it is for the salary as well. If I give the salary less than 8,000, in that case it will give me this kind of error. Salary must be at least 8,000. Okay, so you can see, and this error response is not correct. Our error response would be same across the application. So for that, you can see whenever, yeah, the flow is same: controller, controller, and in this case, yeah, in this case it is bit different. Let me explain the flow very quickly. Okay. Let's say post. In post you are sending empty user name. Let me demonstrate empty username. Okay, this is actually put. Let me go to the post and let me empty the username. You can see now I'm getting this. So if you are sending empty username, what will happen? It will come inside your controller, and you can see at the rate valid, which take care of the validation exceptions. Okay. So what I am saying Spring Boot over here, hey, validate this employee DTO according to these fields, this not blank, at the rate email, and at the rate decimal min. So this annotation basically says that you need to make sure that this first name cannot be blank, because I have annotated this field with the not blank annotation. Okay. So Spring Boot automatically checks it, okay, before it goes to the service layer. Once it comes to the controller, bef- once the request comes to the controller, the Spring Boot verifies this DTO and it finds that first name is empty, and Spring Boot itself throwing an exception. And guess what? This exception comes to our race controller advice, meaning global exception handler, and it checks which method is handling the validation exception. So this method argument not valid exception will be thrown by the Spring Boot, and this method basically handle all the validation exception. So I need to modify this method so I can have response like this. So instead of this, I can have a response like this. Okay. So for that, I need to change this method. So let me do the needful over here. Let me first implement and then I will explain. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to prepare one message. Okay. So this will be here. Okay. This looks fine to me. Okay. And let me do one more thing. Uh, it returns list. I am streaming over the list. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to use map, and then the variable will be E for the field error. And I'm going to concat one message over here. E get field meaning, let me again undo this. Field meaning this first name, okay, and let me concat, okay, yeah, default message, okay. So what is the default message? This is the message, okay, which we are getting during our validation exception. So I'm going to concat the message and field, and I'm going to prepare one string for that. Okay, so I'm going to use collect, and I'm going to use collectors joining, and I'm going to use comma delimiter. So all the if there is a multiple messages, I will get comma separated messages like first name must not be blank, then comma, then email must be valid, then salary must be valid. Okay, so those kind of I will demonstrate. Don't worry. So let me update this string message as a message is equal to, okay, and let me remove this map. We don't need this map anymore. So okay, now let me prepare. As you remember, in other methods we are preparing the API error. I'm going to do same over here as well. I'm going to prepare API error, okay, and okay, yeah, it comes under this validation comes under the bad request 400, bad request exception. The status is 400. So I will use HTTP status bad request dot value, which will pass 400. And this is the message which we have prepared over here. And yeah, I need to update this response entity as well. Okay, so I can take reference from here. Okay, response entity. Then what I can do, yeah, I can say bad request as well, but let me keep everything similar. Then HTTP status dot bad request. Okay, and over here I will pass the API error. Okay, it is giving me an issue. Let me do one thing. Let me do one thing. Yeah, the issue is here. Um, why I got to know that issue is here because it is complaining about the return type actually. So body, okay. uh, Currently we are returning we are expecting return type as map, but in our case it is this API error, so that's why it is showing us an compilation error. So let me remove this, and instead of that let me use API error. See, error gone. Now let me restart. I'm restarting my application, so this changes gets loaded, and we can see the results. Now let me try this API. See, you can see the difference now. 400 message, first name must not be blank. Okay, let me invalidate the email address as well. So the message will be concatenated. You can see I'm getting email as well inside the message field, email and first name both separated by comma. Okay, and if I use 7,000 salary, see, the salary is also concatenated over here. Okay, you can see salary must be at least 8,000. So now our, and you can see this status as well, which is 400 bad requests, and this all coming from our global exception handler. Okay, so yeah, that's how you can, implement the global exception handler, and this is the testing as well as the explanation how the request travels. Okay, when there is an exception occurrence. Let me correct this API request body, and let me save the correct, let me send the correct request body, and our user should be saved successfully. See, it is saved now. I can see the user over here. One more. Now we have 4 user. Perfect. So guys, this is the end of our global exception handler series. I hope you have learned a lot of things in this series. And if you are find my videos interesting, please share, like, subscribe. See you in the next video. Bye.